Hello, and welcome to this tutorial on total social investment, which is a useful measurement concept for corporate leaders. I am Sarah Kadir, Research Lead at CECP. If you have any questions about the material covered in this tutorial, you can reach me at skadir@cecp.co. Before we get started, a quick introduction to CECP. We are Chief Executives for Corporate Purpose, and we are an organization that supports companies in their purpose journeys and helps them deliver returns on that purpose. Our work is centered on three key areas: societal and community investment, sustainable business, and employee engagement. And we couldn't do our work without the power of our network, comprising many of the world's largest companies. Now, having said all of that, let's dive into total social investment. Total social investment, or TSI, at its core is a quantifiable measure of how much investment a company is putting into that social S in ESG. It's an input metric, a monetary value, that sums up all resources that a company put into social good and the improvement of people. These are resources going to support both people within the company and initiatives to support the larger community. So, how did this come about? CCP was asked by our companies how to measure resources going to that broader S in ESG. So, we created TSI in collaboration with those companies. We levered existing sources to inform how best to define what to include in the S in ESG, such as GRI, ISSB, Bloomberg ESG database, and others, as well as a cohort of measurement experts. The result was TSI, which quantifies social good and intentional social change efforts. The work resulted in two What Counts reports, which you can find on CECP's website, and inclusion in the World Economic Forum's Measuring Stakeholder Capitalism report, which emphasized TSI's role in measuring broader strategic, social, economic contributions. So, what is TSI really solving for? So, it was developed with company input, like I said, because it's really responding to a company need. It's about capturing that data on corporate social investments that otherwise is being kind of left behind. Everyone focuses on the grant making, which is important and valuable and a keystone to a lot of companies' corporate social responsibility and social impact work, but it's not the sum total of everything. And it also better reflects today's strategies and approaches. Companies are being more adventurous than ever in creating these partnerships and these opportunities that don't fit within the confines of traditional philanthropy. And TSI is really creating a standardized way to kind of capture what's not kind of currently being reflected in these existing ESG metrics. It's also more inclusive in its measurement and reporting and kind of levels the playing field for companies of various types with various resources. And it's an especially valuable metric for companies where that grant making can't be a larger part of their portfolio. It's allows for comparison and benchmarking. It has to do with that immateriality of the company, and everyone understands, dollars or whatever unit of currency you want to use, and so it makes it accessible for investors in addition to people within and without the company. Because again, this is what we heard from companies and CEOs is that there's that need that's seemingly in conflict with other needs, right? Where we have that concise list of those comparable shared ESG metrics and the ability to report on their company's unique long-term value creation. And address their most critical material issues. And so TSI is a metric that kind of meets that need for consistency and also customization. Um, and like the reason to consider TSI as part of your current management practices is that it allows for more freedom and flexibility to demonstrate social impact in the way that's best suited for your company. So it's supposed to be additive. It's not supposed to be a huge labor lift, but just like a more encompassing way to talk about all of the work that you are doing outside of just the traditional methods of doing so. So, TSI in practice, how can it actually be helpful for you and your company and your measurement and management practices? So, especially for companies with more traditional corporate philanthropy programs, this framework can help you begin to look at how resources across business units align around social investment, no matter what department people may be in. There's work happening in probably every department that is worth counting and creating purposeful partnerships across the organization to do so. You can create improved internal analysis and internal reporting again across these different business units. And then companies can have a better enterprise wide understanding of all the investments that are being made around social programs. You can wrap your hand around it and get a more of a high level view of what's going on. And that view then informs more effective management of programs and decisions to be more efficient, to be more impactful. And it helps promote a culture of really capturing and validating that social investment data. And then lastly, it also helps you to benchmark across companies. It's always helpful to know what your peers are doing so you can strive to push each other forward, and also have a better understanding of where maybe there are opportunities for your company to grow, and for the sector at large to grow. So TSI at its core is a great organizational tool to help gain a better understanding of where your company is and where it's trying to go. There are 7 categories under which initiatives that can be included in TSI may fall. The 6 categories that are well documented in other frameworks are community investment, DEI or belonging or inclusion or whatever word works for you, health and safety, human rights, training, and labor relations. And then there's a 7th category, social value, which addresses those reporting gaps, with innovative partnerships and strategies that might not be considered in the other 6 categories. And so, over the course of the next 4 modules, we will cover what's in these categories, how to determine what counts in TSI, how to measure the value of TSI for your company, and how to apply TSI to your measurement practices. See you in the next module. Hello, I'm Sarah Kadir, research lead at CECP, speaking with you about total social investment. And in this module of TSI, we will dive deeper into the types of corporate programs and initiatives that will be included under total social investment. As I mentioned in a previous module, TSI comprises 7 total categories. The categories are community investment, internal and external DEI or inclusion or belonging or whatever word works best for your organization, health and safety, human rights, training, and labor relations. These first 6 categories are already well established in many ways by reporting standards like GRI and ISSB, so you can utilize the parameters set by whichever reporting framework is already integrated into your measurement practices to determine what inclusion of these means for you. Soon, I will show you some examples of initiatives that fall under each of these categories. The final category is called social value. That is the one that CECP has spent the most effort defining because it falls outside of the traditional categories. It includes broader partnerships, which are activities that involve partners outside of what is traditional for community investment, and shared strategies, which are initiatives that provide both social good and financial benefit to the company. Of the defined categories, here are some examples. Community investments are grants or other resources going to nonprofit organizations, NGOs, or any other qualified recipient organization that can take the form of direct cash directly from the company, grants from the foundation, or non cash, such as product donation or pro bono, or any kind of in kind that might be done. Internal and external DEI, inclusion, belonging, employee resource groups, excuse me, where people of a shared identity and experience can support one another and be supported by the company. Pay gap adjustments, if you did a pay gap study and found that there are certain groups of people who were paid less than others, and any kind of pay adjustments that you made accordingly. Any programs where you intentionally seek diversely experienced people to become employees. If you enter into a partnership with an organization that hosts a conference meant to get all kinds of people into STEM or whatever your industry of interest is. Or if your company works towards health equity, for example, and develops community health resources to reflect that. And again, the internal affects employees, boards, investors, supply chain, while the external affects the larger community. For health and safety, there's like provision of non-required PPE, outside of what you're required to do by whatever your local health and safety boards require. Employee well-being or mental health resources like EAPs. If you host first aid or CPR training for non-essential employees, those are all examples of health and safety. Human rights, if you change something in your supply chain to a more fair trade supplier, that would count. If you are divesting from an organization during humanitarian crisis, that would count as well. Um, Training, if you're upskilling or reskilling in response to changing labor demands. Right now, we're in the middle of an AI revolution. So bringing your employees along and bringing other people in the community along to be able to respond to those labor demands, that counts as well. Labor relations, if you enter into some kind of collective bargaining agreement with, if your industry utilizes a unionized workforce, that will count as well. and then total social value, which we'll dive into a little bit more. And I also want to note that some of the initiatives can exist in more than one category. So choose the one that fits best for your organization and your company's purpose. So again, social value. That's where the current knowledge gap is. And there are two types of innovative efforts within total social value: broader partnerships and shared strategies. Broader partnerships are those expansions of community investment partnerships with groups or individuals that are excluded from the community investment definition, right? Which typically includes that the recipient must be formally organized, the recipient must exist for a charitable purpose, and the recipient must never distribute profits. Examples are socially driven internships or digital asset donations like data. Shared strategies are business strategies that materially and significantly incorporate social outcomes in the strategy. Examples include shared value initiatives and impact investing. So here are some general broad examples of what might count under social value. So for under what counts, donating products to an individual person, because that is not a formally organized organization. Developing a new product aimed at helping a marginalized community. That intention from the beginning is important to provide that social good. And an internship program for low income youth. Again, there's that emphasis on the social good. What doesn't count are initiatives that you've already accounted for in your total community investment, accounting. We don't want to double count or duplicate any efforts. What also doesn't count is like if your CEO signs an accord or an alliance and that has no financial impact on the company, that's great from a storytelling perspective, but it doesn't actually have an impact on the company. And then finding out that your product has unintentionally been helpful, that also doesn't count because that social impact intention from the beginning wasn't there. Here are some real world examples of social value. The International Bank Macquarie, which has invested in this company, Redemption Roasters, which is a for profit company that really aims to reduce criminal recidivism by providing jobs both in and out of jail, and training and all kinds of resources to help them be productive members of society. Medtronic, during the pandemic, released information about their patented ventilator so that other companies could produce it and other accessories to support it. Southwire, which is an electrical manufacturing company in the southern United States, they have a 12 for Life program that provides education and jobs in their manufacturing facilities to encourage their high school students to graduate, particularly those at-risk youth. And then Dell has Student Tech Crew program where they sell the schools discounted Dell products and help create student-run help desks to encourage those students to pursue careers in IT and technology. In the next module, I'll share some tools to determine what initiatives may count under TSI. Hello, I am Sarah Kadir, research lead at CECP, talking with you about total social investment. And in this module, we will discuss how to determine which of your initiatives to include in TSI. In previous modules, I have shared with you examples of total social value initiatives, but anything that we do over the course of this tutorial is something that can be done through for any total social investment initiative that you might have, whether it's social value or it's one of the other six categories. And here's a handy flowchart or decision tree that can help you determine what initiatives that you can include in TSI. Criterion one, social impact intention, which is if you are intentionally mitigating a negative social impact or increasing social value for a community stakeholder. That is something that is essential for TSI. For criterion two, resources to count, you have to examine did the effort incur costs for that company in the reporting year. That's essential. And then criterion three, financial effect on the company. Did the effort generate or did the effort generate any revenue or reduce any expenses? If it didn't, that's fine. You can include it in TSI anyway. But if it did, then we have to go a little bit further. Criterion four, social impact intention, changing the financial effect. So you have to think, how did that revenue that was generated or those expenses that were saved differ because of the social value of the work that you're doing? If it's the same effort, then you have to keep going. But if that effort required less of a return or less of a margin or had higher risk, then that is something that you include in TSI. If you do have to proceed to the fifth criterion. This is really that catch-all for things that are different and you feel they're different and they are, again, socially impactful, but maybe they don't hit the other criteria. You have to see if that intervention marks change from a past practice. So, can the production of social value from that initiative distinguish the effort from previous business development, or is it not required to maintain company operations? So, you don't want something that's necessary for the company to continue or something that's part of previous business development. This has to be something new, it has to be something fresh. And if it's not any different, then you want to exclude. But if it is different, then you are going to include it in TSI. The intentionality is key. The effort has to have an impact and possibly a specific stakeholder or population in mind. Happy accidents, cuts don't count. And you have to assess your efforts with these criteria, right? Criteria 1 and 2 are deal breakers. It must be intentional and incur some kind of cost. Criteria 3 through 5 are really about assessing that financial effect and that difference from business as usual. And again, costs can be more than just revenue or just dollar values, right? It can be staff time, it can be materials, it can be distribution, it can be R&D expenses. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the Macquarie example that we talked about in a previous module, and we're going to take it through each stage of this flowchart. As a reminder, this was Macquarie investing in redemption roasters, which is geared at reducing criminal recidivism and reoffense. So that first criteria that we're going to look at, social impact intention. This intentionally mitigate a negative social impact or increase social value for a community stakeholder? Yes. Built into the mission of Redemption Roasters work is that positive social impact, and part of the partnership between Macquarie and Redemption Roasters is that shared idea of positive social impact. The second criterion, resources to count. Did the effort incur costs for the company in the reporting year? Yes, Macquarie is investing in this business. That comes with them sending capital to Redemption Roasters in order to do the work that they do. So we're going to say yes, and we're going to proceed to criterion 3. Criterion 3, financial effect on the company. Did the effort generate any revenue or reduce any expenses? Yes, it did generate revenue. This is a for-profit transaction. Macquarie is hoping to receive returns on that investment in the form of dividends or whatever that may be. So we're going to have to proceed to criterion 4. Criterion 4, social impact intention changed the financial effect. How was the revenue generated or expenses saved different because of the social value? Because this is a social impact endeavor that is aimed at a specific population and requires a lot of additional resources to support the people in this program and get them set up for a good life, that does reduce the margins of the returns that Macquarie is receiving. And this is something that Macquarie, if they had invested similar dollar amount into another for-profit business that did not have social impact intentions, they would have received much more of a return on their investment. So because of that, we can stop here and say that yes, we can include it in TSI. There's no reason to proceed to criterion 5. That is the final gate, criterion 5, but most initiatives don't even get there. Most of them by criterion 4, you have figured out whether it's within TSI or not. In the next module, I will discuss how to determine the monetary value of all of your TSI initiatives. Hello, I am Sarah Kadir, Research Lead at CECP, talking with you about total social investment. And now we're going to talk about how to measure, how to count TSI. So once you run an initiative through the decision tree we discussed in the previous module, you have to create a dollar value for it. And there are 3 methods for doing so of varying difficulty. The first one is the cost method. This is the best for social efforts where no revenue was generated. It is a simple addition of all of the expenses that are used to run that initiative, including staff time, materials, distribution, R&D expenses, etc. The second method is standardized, and this works best for 3 different types of efforts. One, if you're donating goods to an individual or non qualified recipient, so where you just calculate the fair market value of the donation. 2, heavily discounted goods to a qualified recipient organization. And 3, initiatives that change the amount of revenue that's generated. And we will go through examples of each of these standardized methods for clarity. The last method is customized. This is best for replicable programs that you want to document calculations for. And this is the most time intensive and requires adequate data collection, but can be helpful in the long run. For companies that have a unique approach to measurement, customized can be right for you. But remember that documentation is key. For the standardized methods of calculating TSI, we do use percentages instead of the full value for many of them. And the reason that we use percentages is because we do want to give credit to the organization, to the company, of course, for the work that they're doing, while also acknowledging that this is something that is contributing to business operations and to profit generation for the company. We always encourage conservatism for TSI. We do want to make sure that the efforts are being accounted for, but also acknowledge that we are doing social good here, right? And so that's why the 20% of foregone revenue is to acknowledge the fact that there is still a lot of revenue generated from these initiatives. 40% of that discounted fair market value is to acknowledge the fact that there are still um, revenues that are being generated from these activities. Obviously, this is our personal suggestion for how to calculate TSI, but ultimately the choice is in your hands. And like I said, we have those customized calculations option for anyone who is interested in just doing what feels best for their organization. So, for the standardized method, we'll start with that first standardized method, number one. This is for donating products to a non qualified recipient. And I've created this example where we are donating as a business 1,000 cans of beans to an individual. So, what you would do is you would take the fair market value of those beans, which I have, created as $1.50, and the total social value of that donation of those 1,000 cans of beans is going to be that $1.50 times 1,000 times the 1,000 cans of beans. And your total social value will be $1,500. I've also noted that in cases where there is economic duress during really stressful economic times where demand is lower, it isn't fair to do the full fair market value because you probably would not receive that full fair market value on the marketplace. So, in those cases, you would do 40% of the fair market value. For standardized method two, right, which is where you're selling discounted products to a qualified recipient. In this example, we'll use the Dell Student Tech Crew that we talked about in a previous module. And then we're going to assume that Dell sells to a school 1,000 laptops as part of that program, in addition to setting up the help desk and creating the training tools for the students. So the fair market value of the laptop is $700,000 total. We're going to assume that each laptop is worth $700 each fair market value. The school pays $350,000, which is a 50% discount on those $700 laptops, so $350 per laptop. And in that case, the total social value will be $350,000 at school costs times that 40%. So that total social value will be $140,000. And then our third method is for when a company makes a choice that foregoes revenue. You can use the Macquarie Redemption Roasters Impact Investing example from a previous module if you want, or we can use, in this case, Medtronic's thinner specification information release that they did during the pandemic. So, for example, if we assume that their projected revenue for that proprietary product, if they had chosen not to share those specifications, was $1 billion, that total social value is going to be 20% of that foregone revenue, which would be $200 million. So that's how you calculate that third method. And then again, these are all three of the methods. The standardized ones are just for those very specific situations, but you can use any of the three as is necessary. And again, this applies to all TSI initiatives, not just social value ones. So if you are doing community investments, obviously that falls under here as well, and the cost of that. If you are doing something where you have employee resource group, the cost of that would fall under here as well. So there are lots of options depending on the types of initiatives you want to do. In our final module, I will discuss how to apply TSI in your company's measurement practices. Hello, I'm Sarah Kadir, research lead at CECP, talking with you about total social investment. And in this final module, I'll talk to you about how you can utilize TSI in your real world company applications. So I walk through ways of measuring total social value as one of the 7 categories that comprise TSI, talk to you about TSI in general and all of the things that go under it, and provided some examples to help connect the dots from concept to application. So if you're ready to try on TSI, I have some suggestions for getting started. Pick just a few programs or initiatives to begin with to get familiar and engage with the framework and valuation guidance. Are there programs that are being run out of your own department that aren't being fully captured? Are there discounted product programs? Is there staff time that's being dedicated to social program development and management? And consider whether there are examples I shared earlier that are similar to programs at your own company. Or you can think about what social issues are most material to your company and industry. Many companies use ISSB and GRI frameworks to hone in, maybe SDGs, something like that. And which are most important to get your arms around for improved measurement, management, and reporting. And then you can also look at what stakeholders might find this more holistic view of total social investment valuable, internal ones or external ones. Are there investments in cross functional initiatives that aren't being well or fully captured currently at your organization that you might want to consider for TSI? And also consider what departments you may need to partner with to access the data that's needed and what processes and cultural or behavioral changes will be needed to support more robust data capture efforts. Or even outside of data access, which departments might have initiatives of their own that might be worth telling. And most importantly, don't feel like you have to calculate TSI for all of your programs the first go round. Really start with just a few that you feel confident with and then expand from there. Robust TSI calculation and reporting can be a multi year effort, so don't try to rush it. Especially for companies with more traditional corporate philanthropy programs, this framework can help companies begin to look at how resources across business units align around social investment, how are philanthropy, HR, and other departments across the business all supporting a talent pipeline program or supplier diversity goals. That those are examples of purposeful partnership. TSI can also support improved internal analysis and internal reporting. Um, Companies can also have a better understanding of enterprise wide investments being made around social programs and really wrap their hands around it. And this more complete view informs more effective management of programs and decisions. It helps promote a culture of capturing and validating both quantitative and qualitative social investment data. One of our companies shared that they're adopting TSI helped them as a company look at how and in what ways resources were being allocated and inspired them to revisit best practices with internal stakeholders, namely the importance of kind of taking a community of first approach to investments to ensure better alignment with the company's goals and greater impact for the community. And lastly, this has the potential to support benchmarking across companies, comparing efforts at companies of the same size or industry, for example, to create the kind of insight that helps advance efforts at individual companies and across the sector at large. TSI at its core is a great organizational tool to help gain a better understanding of where your company is and where it's trying to go. I wanted to share what TSI can look like in practice. For our example company, Acme, in their annual report, they included the following in the social metrics section. They have been calculating their TSI for the last 3 years, and they put their total social investment as a dollar amount for each of those years. And in addition to reporting their TSI for all 3 years, they have also chosen to report how much of that TSI was allocated to each category. This can be done in percentage or dollar value form, but the benefit of reporting as a percentage is that you can see the year-over-year change. For example, there was a reduction in training allocation by 5 percentage points, but an increase in DEI by 6 percentage points. This can be a helpful trend to see as the company is allocating resources and to see what is or what should be a priority. And then here's a real world example. Moody's, their stakeholder sustainability report. They again reported it that monetary unit of measurement, that input metric, and they incorporated it into their current frameworks and how they currently structured their report. And they paired it with more broadly in the report outcomes and impacts, and employed storytelling cases and examples to really highlight what that total social investment looks like in the real world, in addition to just reporting the number for each of those 3 years. A more recent example, ServiceNow and their global impact report for 2024, they put it as a pie chart or a donut chart. That's also a great idea as well, with that full value being in the center and then highlighting sections for particular elements. They have community investment here, for example, and they have $14 million dollars as their total social value. So you can see how this can apply to your reporting externally, as well as what you can do internally with it as well. And lastly, I'm going to leave you with some thought leadership and guidance from us at CECP that you can find at our website, ccp.co, that might help you further along in your TSI journey. We have our two seminal TSI reports, what counts the S and ESG and what counts new in conclusions. We also have our TSI evaluation guidance that can be found within our annual surveys evaluation guidance. And that final section, the whole back, is just about TSI. And then finally, our Investing in Society report that comes out annually that talks about ESG measurement, performance, and disclosure, of which TSI is a part. Again, you can reach out to me at skadir@cecp.co. Thank you for your time.